The night he disappeared, the cameras flashed endlessly as Keanu Reeves stepped onto the red carpet, his calm smile reflecting the glow of hundreds of lights. Fans screamed his name from behind the barriers, holding posters and phones high. The premiere of his new film had drawn the biggest crowd of the year. Beside him, Sandra Bullock waved gracefully, her laughter echoing over the chaos. They had shared many moments on screen, but tonight, something about Keanu felt different. His eyes seemed distant, his voice softer, and his steps slower than usual. The reporters shouted questions, asking about his next project, about his friendship with Sandra, about the rumors of him retiring. Keanu only smiled politely and gave brief answers. When one reporter asked, "Keanu, are you okay?" "You look a bit pale tonight," he simply replied. "Just tired." Sandra turned her head, watching him with quiet concern. She noticed the way he pressed his hand against his chest for a second, before straightening up and pretending nothing happened. As they moved down the carpet, posing for photographers, Sandra leaned closer and whispered, "You sure you're fine?" He nodded. "Yeah, just the lights. They're too bright." But she knew there was something else. The look in his eyes told her he was trying to hide pain, not just from the crowd, but from himself. The premiere ended late at night. After the film, fans gathered outside the theater waiting for autographs. Sandra looked around but couldn't find Keanu anywhere. His car was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail and no one on the crew had seen him leave. The studio staff said he had mentioned needing a few minutes alone. They assumed he had left quietly to avoid attention. But deep inside, Sandra felt uneasy. Keanu never left without saying goodbye. Hours passed. She texted him again and again. No reply. She even called his assistant, who hadn't heard from him since the red carpet. Finally, she called the police to report him missing, though part of her felt it was too soon. But something inside her heart whispered that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Keanu Reeves vanishes after movie premiere. Fans online speculated everything from a secret trip to a health emergency. Paparazzi searched every street near the theater. Sandra stayed silent, spending hours on the phone, calling hospitals discreetly, afraid of what she might hear. By evening, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. A calm male voice said, "Is this Sandra Bullock?" She froze. "Yes, who is this?" The voice replied, "I'm calling from St. Vincent's Hospital. We have someone here who mentioned your name before losing consciousness." Her heart pounded. "Who?" she whispered, already knowing the answer. She arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. Nurses hurried past, and the only sound was the steady beep of machines behind closed doors. A doctor walked toward her holding a clipboard. "You're Miss Bullock?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Your friend, Mr. Reeves, was brought in late last night. He was found unconscious near an alley close to the premiere venue. He's stable now, but we're still running tests." Sandra's knees weakened. She followed the doctor into the room, and there he was, Keanu Reeves, lying pale and still, a bandage on his arm, his breathing shallow but steady. The sight of him connected to machines shattered something inside her. She stepped closer, touching his hand. It was cold. The doctor continued. "We're not sure what caused it yet. There's no sign of injury or overdose. Maybe stress or exhaustion. He kept saying your name before he fainted." Sandra sat by his side, silent tears running down her cheeks. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell me you weren't okay?" She stayed there for hours holding his hand, remembering every conversation, every laugh they'd shared over the years. He had always been the strong one, the one who helped everyone else. Now it was her turn to stay. As the night deepened, the hospital corridor grew quiet. Sandra looked out the window, city lights shimmering in the distance. She thought about how fame never protected anyone from loneliness or pain or the weight of being human. Keanu had carried kindness like armor, always smiling through storms. But maybe this time the storm had been too heavy. When the nurse entered to check his vitals, Sandra asked softly, "Did he say anything before he passed out?" The nurse hesitated. "Just one thing, ma'am," he said. "Tell her not to blame herself." The words struck deep, echoing inside her mind. Blame herself for what? What had happened that night? She stared at his still face and whispered, I'm not leaving you again." But as she said that, the monitor beside his bed suddenly flickered. His heartbeat began to slow. Alarms went off. Nurses rushed in, and Sandra was pushed gently out of the room. She watched through the glass, her hands trembling, tears blurring her vision. The doctor shouted orders. They tried everything: compressions, injections, oxygen. The world outside the glass became a blur of movement and sound. Sandra whispered prayers under her breath, begging him to stay, to open his eyes, to smile again. Then, after endless seconds, the beeping steadied. One of the nurses sighed with relief. "He's back," someone said. But even as life returned to the monitor, Sandra could feel something had changed. Keanu was alive, but something inside him seemed lost. The doctor stepped out, his voice low. "He's stable for now, but we'll need to observe him. Something about his brain scans is unusual." Sandra frowned. "Unusual how?" The doctor looked hesitant. "He was murmuring names, and not just yours. People who aren't alive anymore." Her blood ran cold. Keanu had always spoken about loss, about the pain of people he'd loved and lost. Maybe now, in his unconscious mind, he was reliving all those memories. She wondered if his heart had finally broken under the weight of all the kindness he gave away. As dawn began to break outside the hospital window, Sandra sat beside him again. His hand twitched slightly, and she leaned closer, hoping to hear his voice. He whispered something faint, barely audible but enough to send chills through her body. "They're not gone, Sandra. They're here." Her breath caught. She looked at his face, pale but peaceful. What did he mean? Who was they? Before she could ask, his hand went still again, and the monitors beeped steadily in rhythm with his heartbeat. The nurse dimmed the lights, and Sandra sat in silence, holding his hand as the first light of morning touched the city skyline. She didn't know it yet, but that whisper was the beginning of something far deeper. A secret that would test both their hearts and reveal a truth about Keanu's disappearance no one could have imagined. And as the camera of life slowly faded on that scene, the audience was left wondering, what had Keanu seen between the moments of life and death? And why had he come back with a message that would change everything? Whispers in the quiet room. The next morning, the hospital was filled with the faint hum of machines and the soft shuffle of footsteps. Sunlight spilled gently through the blinds, painting pale stripes across Keanu's motionless face. Sandra sat beside him, her head resting on her folded arms, half awake, half lost in memories. She hadn't gone home. The coffee beside her had turned cold hours ago, but she didn't care. All that mattered was the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. When the doctor entered, Sandra quickly lifted her head. He spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. "He's stable, but he hasn't fully regained consciousness. His body is healing, but his mind..." He paused, searching for words. "His mind might still be somewhere else." Sandra frowned. "What does that mean?" The doctor exhaled, looking down at his clipboard. "When he woke briefly last night, he mentioned names we can't connect to any family or friends on record. He said things that sounded like memories, but from different times, different places." Sandra's heart tightened. She had heard that kind of confusion before when her father was once under anesthesia. But this felt different. She remembered Keanu's whisper from the night before. "They're not gone, Sandra. They're here." Those words had stayed with her, circling in her thoughts like a haunting melody she couldn't escape. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. People hurried to work, taxis honked, and morning light shimmered on wet pavement. The world kept going, even when someone you cared about was lying between life and death. She turned back to Keanu and whispered, "Come back to me, okay? Don't get lost there." As the day went on, more visitors came. His manager, a few colleagues, and even a few fans who had found their way past the security desk. Everyone asked the same question, what happened? But no one had answers. The security cameras near the alley where he was found showed him walking alone, turning into a side street, and then disappearing for almost 2 hours. When he reappeared on another camera, he was already collapsing. No one else was seen with him. It was as if he had simply vanished from one world and returned to another. Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. She had known Keanu for years, had seen his quiet strength, his strange calm even in chaos. He was a man who carried pain gracefully, never showing it unless you looked closely enough. She had often wondered how someone so kind could live with so much grief. He never spoke about it openly, but in the silence between conversations, she could feel the ghosts he carried. As night approached again, Sandra refused to leave his side. The nurse dimmed the lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing softly near the bed. Keanu stirred slightly, his fingers twitching. Sandra leaned closer. His eyelids fluttered, and his voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. "Where am I?" She smiled through tears. "You're safe, you're in the hospital." "You scared everyone." He blinked, confusion clouding his face. "How long?" She replied. "Since last night." There was a pause, then his gaze drifted toward the ceiling. "I saw something," he murmured. She frowned, unsure if he was fully awake. "What did you see?" His voice trembled. "It wasn't a dream, Sandra. It felt real. I was walking down that alley and suddenly everything around me stopped. The noise, the lights, gone. I heard voices. Familiar ones." Sandra's heart raced. "Whose voices?" Keanu hesitated, his lips trembling slightly. "My mother and Jennifer." The mention of that name struck her like lightning. Jennifer, the woman he had loved and lost decades ago. Sandra felt her throat tighten. "You mean, you heard them?" He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "They were calling my name. I followed the sound and there was this light. Not bright like the sun, but soft, warm. I wanted to stay there." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "But you came back." He turned his head slightly toward her. "No, something pulled me back. It wasn't my choice." The silence between them grew heavy, filled with things neither of them knew how to say. The nurse entered quietly to check the monitors, but even she paused for a second, sensing the strange tension in the room. After she left, Sandra whispered, "Maybe it was your mind trying to heal Keanu. Trauma can do that." He shook his head gently. "This wasn't my mind. It was something else. I think someone wanted me to see something, to remember." His words left her unsettled. She had always believed in science, in logic, but sitting there with the glow of the machines reflecting in his eyes, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. She felt a chill crawl across her skin. "Remember what?" she asked. Keanu looked at her, and for a moment it seemed like he wanted to say more, but then his expression softened. "Not yet. It's not time." She wanted to push, to ask again, but his eyes closed and his breathing steadied. Exhaustion had claimed him. Sandra sat back, staring at the hospital floor. Her mind spun with questions she couldn't answer. Was it possible that in those lost hours, he had crossed into something beyond understanding? The next morning brought more confusion. The doctor returned with test results that didn't make sense. "His brain scans show heightened activity in areas that should be at rest," the doctor explained. "It's as if he's dreaming even when awake, and his heart rate changes when he hears certain names." Sandra frowned. "Like what names?" The doctor looked at his notes. "His late mother's name. And yours." She felt her chest tighten. She thanked the doctor and waited until he left, then turned to Keanu, who was awake again, quietly watching the light filter through the curtains. "You heard that?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah, and it's true. When I hear your name, it feels like I'm being pulled somewhere." "Pulled where?" she whispered. He hesitated, his eyes distant. "Back to the alley. To that moment before I fell." The air in the room grew heavy again. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, though the sky was still bright. Sandra leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Keanu, what happened in that alley?" His hand trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "Someone was there with me, but it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I knew." Her pulse quickened. "Who?" Keanu's lips parted, but before he could answer, a loud knock echoed from the door. A nurse entered, breathless. "Miss Bullock, there's someone asking to see you." "They said they were with Mr. Reeves last night." Sandra froze. Keanu turned his head slightly toward the door, his expression darkening with something she had never seen in him before. "Fear." The nurse added quietly. "They said they know what really happened." And in that moment, Sandra realized the mystery wasn't just about where Keanu had gone. It was about who had brought him back, and why. The hallway outside grew colder, the lights flickering faintly as if the air itself carried a secret waiting to unfold. The visitor in the rain. The rain had started to fall outside the hospital, soft at first, then heavier, until the windows were streaked with silver lines of water. Sandra stood by the doorway, her heart pounding, watching the nurse walk away. The words still echoed in her mind. They said they were with Mr. Reeves last night. She turned back toward Keanu, who looked pale but strangely alert now, as if those words had drawn something deep inside him awake. "Should I let them in?" she asked quietly. Keanu didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted toward the window, following the falling rain. Finally, he whispered, "Yes, but stay close." A few moments later, the door opened and a tall man stepped in. His clothes were damp from the rain, his hair slightly disheveled, and his eyes carried a strange mix of calm and sorrow. He looked around the room before speaking softly. "I'm sorry to come unannounced. My name is Daniel." Sandra studied him carefully, instinctively cautious. "You said you were with Keanu last night." "Who exactly are you?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at Keanu. "We met near the alley behind the premier hall." He was alone, walking toward the back exit. "I thought he recognized me, but maybe he didn't." Keanu's brows furrowed slightly. "I remember someone calling my name," he said slowly. "I thought it was someone else." Daniel nodded. "You looked lost. I tried to help, but then you collapsed. Before I could call for help, you said something that made me stop." Sandra leaned forward. "What did he say?" Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes glistening under the dim hospital light. He said, "Tell her I finally found them." "Then you lost consciousness." Silence filled the room. Sandra looked from Daniel to Keanu, confusion mixing with fear. "Found who?" she asked softly. Keanu didn't answer. His gaze fell to the sheets, his hands trembling slightly. "I saw them again," he whispered. Daniel frowned. "When he said that, I thought he was delirious. But now, I'm not so sure." Sandra stepped closer. "Why are you not sure?" Daniel looked at her with a haunted expression. "Because after he fainted, I saw something too. Just for a second, a light, soft, golden, coming from the alley wall. Then it disappeared." The words made Sandra's skin prickle. Keanu closed his eyes, his voice barely audible. "That light, it wasn't just light. It was a doorway." Sandra felt her breath catch. "A doorway to what?" Keanu looked up at her, his eyes glistening. "To them, to the ones I lost." The rain outside grew heavier, the sound filling the silence. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, as if unsure whether to believe his own memory. "When I looked back at the wall," he said quietly, "there was nothing there. But I swear I saw silhouettes inside that light, two figures standing close together." Sandra's chest tightened. She knew about Keanu's pain, his lost love, his parents, all those who had quietly disappeared from his life one by one. For years, he had carried their memories like invisible wounds. Now she wondered if something beyond this world had finally reached back for him. The doctor entered briefly to check on Keanu, breaking the tension. After he left, Daniel turned to go. "I just needed you to know," he said, his voice trembling. "Whatever happened last night, it wasn't an accident." As he left, the door clicked softly behind him, leaving an uneasy stillness. Sandra sat back down, staring at Keanu. "You believe him?" she asked. Keanu nodded slowly. "I don't know if it's belief or memory, but I remember that light and the feeling of peace inside it, like all the noise in the world had stopped." He paused, his eyes distant. "When I was inside it, I saw her, my mother, was smiling, and next to her was Jennifer. They didn't say anything, but I knew what they wanted. They were telling me to let go." Sandra's throat tightened. "Let go of what?" He turned to her, his voice trembling. "The guilt, the pain, the need to always fix what's broken. I've spent my whole life giving pieces of myself to everyone else, and for a moment I thought maybe it was time to stop." Sandra felt tears rising. "But you came back," she whispered. Keanu's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Because I heard your voice. You were calling me. I followed the sound and the light faded. I think you pulled me back." The words struck deep, shaking her in ways she couldn't explain. She looked away, her hands trembling slightly. "Keanu, I don't even know what to say." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to. Just being here means everything." For a while, neither of them spoke. The storm outside grew louder, wind pressing against the glass. Then, just as the clock ticked past midnight, the hospital lights flickered again. The same strange pulse as the night before. Keanu's heartbeat monitor spiked suddenly. Sandra jumped to her feet. "Nurse!" she called, but Keanu grabbed her hand. "Wait," he whispered, his eyes wide. "Do you see it?" She turned toward the corner of the room and froze. For a brief, impossible second, a faint golden glow shimmered against the wall, soft and almost invisible. Within it, she could almost see shapes, human shapes, blurred and glowing faintly. Keanu's voice trembled. "They're here again!" The nurse rushed in, flipping on the main lights, and the glow vanished instantly. "His vitals are fluctuating again," she said urgently, calling for the doctor. As they adjusted the machines, Sandra stood motionless, her heart racing. The image of that golden light burned into her mind. Later that night, when the chaos settled and Keanu drifted into sleep again, Sandra walked out into the empty corridor. Daniel was gone, and the rain had stopped. She stared at her reflection in the glass door and whispered to herself, "What, if it wasn't just in his head?" As she turned to go back, a piece of paper caught her eye on the floor near the nurse's desk. She picked it up. It was damp from the rain, a note written in hurried handwriting. "He's not the only one who saw the light." Beneath the words was an address. She looked up, her heart pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Someone out there knew what really happened that night, and Sandra was determined to find them before the truth disappeared like the light itself. And as the camera of destiny pulled back from that quiet hospital hallway, the storm clouds parted outside, revealing a sliver of pale moonlight, the same kind of glow that had followed Keanu from the alley to the edge of life itself. The house at the end of Rose Avenue. The address on the note kept haunting Sandra all night. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that faint golden light flickering on the hospital wall, just for a second, like a breath between two worlds. Keanu had drifted back into deep sleep, and the doctor said his condition was stable for now. But she couldn't stop thinking about the words on that crumpled piece of paper. He's not the only one who saw the light. By dawn, she made her decision. She left a message for the nurse in case Keanu woke up and quietly slipped out of the hospital. The morning was cold, the streets glistening after the night's storm. She took a cab to Rose Avenue, the address scribbled in her hand trembling slightly. It was a quiet street, lined with old trees and small houses that looked untouched by time. The cab stopped at the last house, a small white cottage with peeling paint and a wind chime that whispered softly in the morning breeze. The gate creaked as she pushed it open. She hesitated at the door for a moment before knocking. An old woman opened it. Her eyes were soft but sharp, her silver hair tied neatly behind her head. She looked at Sandra as if she had been expecting her. "You came," the woman said quietly. Sandra blinked, startled. "You know who I am?" The woman smiled faintly. "Everyone knows who you are, child. But that's not why you're here. Come in before the wind catches your thoughts." Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Photographs lined the walls, pictures of people Sandra didn't recognize, except one. It was a photo of a young Keanu, barely 20, standing beside a woman who looked very much like this old lady. Sandra's breath caught. You knew him?" The woman nodded slowly, sitting down near a small table. "Knew him? I helped him once, years ago, when he was just starting out. He came here searching for answers after his father passed. He was lost then, too, and now it seems the world has brought you here for the same reason." Sandra sat down opposite her, confusion and curiosity mixing in her chest. "What do you mean? How do you know what happened?" The woman's eyes seemed to look right through her. "You saw the light, didn't you?" Sandra froze. How do you know that? The woman didn't smile this time. Because I've seen it too. Years ago, after my husband died. The same golden glow, the same whispering air. It comes for those who carry unfinished love. It came for Keanu last night because his heart has never stopped searching. Sandra leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. You're saying that light was real? The woman nodded. Real enough to change a person forever. It's not death, not heaven. Something in between. A place that shows you what your soul still clings to. She paused, her gaze softening. For him, that place is crowded with ghosts. His mother, his love, his pain. All the things he never let go of. Sandra's throat tightened. Then why did he come back? Because someone called him back, the woman said simply. You. The words struck deep. Sandra felt her heartbeat quicken. But I didn't do anything, she whispered. You cared, the woman said, her tone almost tender. Sometimes love unspoken is stronger than any prayer. Your voice, your grief, your fear. He heard it when the world went quiet. That's why he's still breathing. The house fell silent except for the soft rustle of the curtains. Sandra looked down, overwhelmed. He said they told him to let go. His mother and Jennifer. Maybe that light was giving him peace. But what if it calls again? The woman's eyes darkened. It will, she said softly. The light never leaves unfinished stories. And his story isn't done yet. When it returns, he'll have to make a choice, to stay or to go. Sandra's voice trembled. How do I stop it? You don't, the woman replied. You help him understand why he's still here. Sometimes the living need to remind the lost what life still holds. Before Sandra could ask more, a faint ringing sound filled the air. Her phone. She glanced at it. It was the hospital. Her hands shook as she answered. The nurse's voice came through, urgent and breathless. Ms. Bullock, you need to come back. Something's happening with Mr. Reeves. Sandra stood up instantly. What happened? His heart rate spiked again, the nurse said. But he's awake now. And he's asking for you. She thanked the woman and rushed toward the door. The old lady called after her softly. Remember, the light doesn't just appear to take. Sometimes it appears to remind. The cab ride back felt endless. Sandra's mind was racing with every word the woman had said. Unfinished love. The light will return. Choice. By the time she reached the hospital, her heart was pounding like a drum. She ran through the hallway, breathless, until she reached Keanu's room. He was sitting upright now, pale but conscious. When he saw her, a faint smile curved his lips. You found it, didn't you? She froze at the doorway. Found what? The house, he said softly. On Rose Avenue. I dreamt of it before you left. My mother used to take me there as a child. She said it was a place where lost hearts found peace. Sandra's chest tightened. She knew the woman there. She helped you once. Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes distant. She used to tell me that love never dies. It only changes form. I didn't understand it then. But last night, when the light came back, I think I finally did. Sandra stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. What do you mean? He looked at her, his expression soft but filled with something deep. Something that went beyond words. When I was there, in that light, I saw them again. My mother smiled and Jennifer whispered something. She said, Don't run anymore. Your heart already knows where it belongs. Sandra's breath caught. And where does it belong? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, his fingers trembling but warm. Here, he whispered. Right here. For the first time in years, Sandra couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears as the reality of his words sank in. The beeping of the monitors faded into the background, replaced by the sound of the rain outside, slowing to a gentle hush. But just as peace seemed to settle over the room, Keanu's body stiffened. His eyes widened, staring at something beyond her shoulder. Sandra turned, and for a split second, the golden light shimmered again near the window. Faint figures stood within it, barely visible, their outlines glowing softly. "They're back," Keanu whispered, his voice trembling. Sandra gripped his hand tightly. "Don't go," she pleaded. "Not yet." His breathing grew shallow again, the machines picking up speed. The doctor rushed in, shouting for the nurses. Sandra stepped back as they surrounded him, tears streaming down her face. The light on the wall flickered once more, then vanished completely. The monitors fell silent, and as the doctor called for emergency support, Sandra stood frozen, her heart breaking in quiet disbelief. For the first time since the red carpet, the world truly felt empty. But deep inside her, she could still feel warmth on her hand. Faint, but real, as if someone was still holding it. The silence between heartbeats. The hospital room was a storm of movement, alarms screaming, nurses rushing in, doctors calling out numbers that Sandra couldn't understand. She stood frozen near the door, her palms cold and trembling. All she could see was Keanu lying still, his hand falling limp against the white sheets. The golden glow that had filled the room moments ago was gone, leaving behind only the harsh fluorescent light that made everything look painfully real. Someone shouted, "Clear!" A defibrillator sparked. Keanu's body jolted slightly, then fell back again. Another voice said, "One more time." Sandra pressed her hand against her mouth, tears streaming down. She whispered his name, again and again, as if the sound of it could hold him here. Then, after what felt like forever, the beeping sound returned, faint but steady. A nurse exhaled, whispering, "We've got him." The chaos slowed. The doctor turned toward Sandra. "He's back," he said softly. "But his body's weak. We're moving him to intensive care." As they wheeled Keanu away, Sandra followed quietly, her mind blank but her heart full of noise. She wanted to scream, to ask why this kept happening, why he was being pulled between worlds. But all she could do was walk beside the bed, her fingers brushing the edge of the rail as if afraid to lose touch with him again. Hours passed. When the machines finally settled into their rhythmic hum, Sandra sat beside him once more. He looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, as though he was somewhere far away. The nurses had left. The doctor told her he needed rest, that his body was fighting something unseen, exhaustion, stress, maybe even trauma. But Sandra knew it was more than that. Something was calling him back to that light, and each time it took a little more of him. The night grew quiet. She leaned forward, whispering softly, "Please, stay with me. Don't let them take you yet." Her eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in 2 days, she drifted into a light sleep beside him. When she opened her eyes again, the world around her was silent. Not the soft kind of silence, but the deep, unnatural stillness that feels like holding your breath underwater. The monitors were still on, but their sounds were gone. She turned slowly, and what she saw made her heart freeze. The entire room had changed. The walls were no longer white, but glowing faintly gold. The window was open, and outside there was no city, only light. Keanu was standing by the window, awake, dressed in the same suit he'd worn the night of the premiere. His back was to her, his figure calm, still. "Keanu?" she whispered. He turned slowly. His face was soft, serene, almost glowing. "You're not supposed to be here," he said gently. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Somewhere between what's real and what we remember," he replied. "I didn't want you to see this place." She stepped closer. "Is this the light?" He nodded slightly. "It's where I go when everything stops. It's peaceful here. No noise, no pain. But each time I come back, it's harder to leave." Her eyes filled with tears. Then don't go back there. Stay here. With me? He smiled faintly. You don't understand. This place isn't calling me because I want to leave life. It's calling because I haven't finished living. She frowned. That doesn't make sense. He looked past her toward the glowing horizon. It will. You'll see soon. And just as he said that, the golden light around them began to pulse. Figures started to appear again. His mother, Jennifer, and others she couldn't recognize, all standing silently in the distance. They weren't frightening. They looked peaceful, patient as if waiting. They want me to remember something, he whispered. Something I forgot long ago. Sandra shook her head, tears falling freely. Then remember it when you wake up. Don't go there to do it. Come back to me. He stepped closer, his hand reaching toward her face. His touch was warm, real. You were always the one who saw through me, Sandra. You saw the broken parts and still stayed. That's what love is, she whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that held gratitude and sorrow all at once. Then promise me something. Anything. If I can't come back this time, don't wait for the light. Live. Her chest ached. Don't say that. Before she could speak again, the light flared brighter. The air began to vibrate. Keanu took a step back, and his outline started to fade. She tried to run to him, but her feet wouldn't move. He looked at her one last time. Thank you, he whispered, for being the voice that called me home. And then everything vanished. Sandra gasped awake, back in the hospital chair, her heart racing. The monitors were beeping again, the room exactly as it had been. She looked at Keanu, still asleep, breathing softly. Her trembling hand reached for his, and this time his fingers moved slightly, curling around hers. She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. You scared me, she whispered. Suddenly the door opened. It was Daniel again, the man from before. His face was pale, his eyes wide. Ms. Bullock, he said quickly, I found something. The alley where he fell, it wasn't just an empty wall. There's a mark there now, the same glow from that night. It's still there. Sandra's heart skipped. What do you mean still there? It's faint but real, Daniel said. And there's something written beside it, words carved into the brick. What words? Daniel swallowed hard. Love doesn't end. It waits. The same warmth she had felt in that dream spread through her again. She looked at Keanu, at the calm rise and fall of his chest, and for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt since that night. Hope. As Daniel turned to leave, Sandra whispered to herself, then maybe he's not gone at all. Maybe love really does wait. Outside the window, the rain had stopped completely. The first light of dawn broke across the sky, soft and golden, the same shade of light that had called Keanu away, now spilling gently into the room, wrapping them both in warmth. But in the faint rhythm of the heart monitor, Sandra could still hear something more, a whisper, quiet but clear. Not goodbye. Not yet. The morning he woke, the first rays of sunlight crept through the hospital blinds, soft and golden, painting everything in a warm glow that felt almost unreal. Sandra sat beside Keanu, her fingers still wrapped around his hand. It had been hours since Daniel left, but she hadn't moved. The note he brought back from the alley still rested on the table beside her. Love doesn't end, it waits. Those words echoed in her mind, steady as the sound of the heart monitor beside her. She hadn't realized she was crying until a tear fell onto her wrist. She wiped it quickly, whispering, "You have to wake up now. The world needs you. I need you." Her voice trembled soft as the wind outside. The hospital was quiet, unusually still for morning. The nurses spoke in hushed tones, and the hum of machines seemed distant, almost respectful. Time itself felt slower, as if waiting for something. Sandra leaned forward, brushing her thumb gently over Keanu's hand. "You've spent your whole life saving others from silence," she whispered. "Now it's your turn to be saved." For a long while, nothing changed. Then, somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, she felt it, a faint movement beneath her fingers. His hand twitched. Her breath caught. "Keanu?" she whispered. His eyelids fluttered, slow and heavy. The heart monitor quickened. She leaned closer, barely daring to breathe. His lips parted, a soft whisper escaping. "Light." Sandra pressed his hand to her chest. "Yes, I know. But you're safe now. It's gone." He blinked again, the faintest hint of confusion in his eyes. "No," he murmured, voice weak but clear. "It's not gone. It's here." His eyes moved slowly toward the window. The golden sunlight had grown brighter, pouring into the room like a blessing. It filled every shadow, reflecting softly off the white walls. For a moment, it looked almost alive. "What do you see?" Sandra asked softly. He smiled faintly, his voice trembling. "Not what. Who?" She turned, but saw only light. Keanu's gaze was fixed beyond her, eyes shining with quiet peace. "They're not calling me anymore," he said. "They're just smiling. I think they wanted me to say goodbye properly." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't have to go anywhere," she whispered. "You already said goodbye when you came back?" He looked at her, his eyes soft but steady. "Coming back wasn't goodbye, Sandra. It was a promise." Her breath hitched. "A promise?" "That I'd finally live," he said. "Not just exist. Not just survive the pain, but live." For a long time they said nothing. The morning light wrapped around them like something sacred. The machines hummed quietly, steady and calm. Then Keanu spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know what that light really was?" She shook her head slowly. "It wasn't death," he said. "It was love showing me everything I'd been too afraid to feel. All the people I'd lost, all the kindness I'd given away, it came back. Not to take me, but to remind me that love never disappears. It waits. Just like that message." Sandra smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it waited for me too." He reached for her hand again, his grip stronger now. It did. They sat there in silence, two souls who had both seen too much loss, now finding something unspoken in the quiet between them. The light outside softened, no longer blinding, just warm, real, alive. Hours passed, and by afternoon, the doctors confirmed what everyone had hoped. Keanu's recovery was steady, his heartbeat strong, his body responding as if something inside him had finally decided to stay. When the nurse left, Sandra turned to him. "You scared me, you know," he smiled gently. "I scare myself sometimes." She laughed softly, her eyes red but shining. "Do you remember everything that happened?" He nodded. "Enough to know that not everything that shines is meant to blind us. Sometimes it's meant to guide us back." That evening, the two of them walked slowly through the hospital garden. The air smelled of wet earth and blooming jasmine. Every step he took seemed careful, as if he was relearning how to exist in the world. Sandra walked beside him, matching his pace. They stopped near a small pond. The water rippled softly, reflecting the fading sunlight. Keanu looked at his reflection and said quietly, "You know what I realized in that place?" "What?" she asked. "That I spent my life trying to be grateful for pain. I thought it made me humble, kind. But I never learned to be grateful for the people who stayed." She looked at him, her throat tightening. "Some people are worth staying for." He turned toward her, his smile tender. "You are." The sky deepened into shades of pink and gold, the last light of day brushing against their faces. The world felt new again, lighter somehow, as if the storm that had followed them both had finally passed. As they sat quietly, a faint breeze stirred the trees. Keanu closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "For the first time in years," he said softly, "I don't feel haunted anymore." Sandra looked at him. "Maybe that's because the ghosts finally rested." He opened his eyes, his gaze full of peace. "Or maybe," he whispered, "they were never ghosts at all. Maybe they were love just waiting for me to see it." A quiet smile spread across her face. "Then don't stop seeing it," he nodded. "Never again." And for a long while they just sat there. No cameras, no red carpets, no noise. Just two hearts that had found each other again, in a world that suddenly seemed softer, brighter, and real. The light faded gently, but it left something behind, a stillness filled with meaning. When they finally walked back toward the hospital, hand in hand, the golden hue of the sunset followed them, lingering in the sky as if refusing to say goodbye. And for the first time, Keanu didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because sometimes the light that once tried to take you away becomes the same light that shows you how to live.